Hi, everyone. Good evening. I think it's pretty much going to be evening for many of you in the African region. And I think for most of others also in the European region, it's mostly evening for you, unless probably you're in the United States or somewhere else. So I trust your day has been well. It's so great to have you all here for the Google Summer of Code webinar. And we trust it's going to be a very insightful session. Uh, yeah. So I think we have quite a number of people from different African countries and also quite outside Africa anyways, which is really nice. So probably if you're here and maybe your country is not here, you can do well to also let us know in the comments where you're joining in from. I'm currently joining in from Nigeria, and I think we have some folks from Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Cameroon, the Gambia, Zimbabwe. Some of these countries, we do have chapters in them also. A few of them we don't. Uganda, Namibia, India, Togo, Zimbabwe. Oh, we have Zimbabwe twice. That's nice. Canada, the United Kingdom, Benin, Rwanda, Netherlands, Congo, Botswana, France, and the United States. It's so great to have you all here today. We would be going in depth into the Google Summer of Code program, which has been running for quite a number of years now. I'm sure many of you have questions already, and I'm excited to ask them, excited to learn from our guests for today, whom we would bring in shortly. So, yeah. So basically, this is a rough agenda of what we have today. The talk will run for about 40 to 45 minutes. And then after that period, we would have questions and answers. So if you already signed up to join the events, I'm sure you most likely already filled the form and you put your questions. We've collected all of those questions and Stephanie will answer all of them. If you have new questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Probably just add like a question prefix to it so we know it's a question. And then, at the end of the session, we would answer those questions. And we're so excited to have you all here today. So I'll be looking at the comments and, highlighting a couple of them. I see you, Was. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Okay, Wasiu from Togo. We have Ijoma from Nigeria. Nice to meet you all. We have Ibrahim from Bauchi, and I'm sure there are a couple of other persons also who are here. Nice to have you all. We have Femi. Welcome, Femi. All right. So in about a couple of minutes, we would get started. Before we start, I would like to introduce our guest to you all. We have Stephanie with us. Stephanie is a member of the Google Open Source Programs Office, popularly known as OSPO, and leads the GSoC program. The GSoC is also Google Summer of Code, with the O in small letters. I've seen quite different variations of that. Even me, myself, sometimes I do GSoC all in caps, but it's nice. It has a nice twist to it. Stephanie has been running the program for 13 plus years now. So trust me, if you have any questions about the Google Summer of Code, Stefan is the person you should be asking. Stefan is a program manager with over 25 years of experience managing clients' relations in the tech, consumer, trade shows, and service industries. We're so excited to have Stefan here today, and we can't wait for you all to, learn about the Google Summer of Code program and see how you can get started. Please welcome Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Balaji. It's so great to be here today, and people from so many different countries. So this is really exciting. I think I've done one other talk where we had quite a few folks. I believe it was from Nigeria, and that was probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago. So super excited to have folks from all across Africa and even Europe and North America, it looks like, as well. So thank you all for joining today.
And thank you very much, Steph.
And thank you for organizing this, first of all. I know this was kind of a quick organization. We had a discussion last week, and Balaji hopped on this, and it's like, all right, let's do it. So thanks. Cool. Well, I'm going to get started. This presentation, like we mentioned, is going to be probably about 35 to 40 minutes. So we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, which I know a bunch of you already have questions. I've seen a bunch of them. Most of them I noticed on there I will be addressing in this presentation, but there are a few I certainly see that are a little out of scope. So not out of scope, but just not in my presentation. So I will be sure to address those, plus any more that come in over the next 40 minutes or so. So let's get started. All right. So first of all, the main thing here is, what is open source? I believe most of you on this call are familiar with it, but I like to always just do a quick slide about what is open source exactly before I get started into the whole presentation. Of course, it's computer software where the source code's available under an open source license, allowing anyone to study it, change it, improve it, and then distribute the software. But really the key to open source, it really is about collaboration. It's about working with others, and it's a community of dedicated developers. I've been very fortunate to be a part of the open source community for over 13 years since I joined Google in 2011. And it's just an amazing community. I have so many friends I've made from across the world. And it's so great. Like I saw Samson when we were in, where were we? We were in the UK a few weeks ago. And so that's when we started talking about doing this talk. So it really is about community and about making great things together, right? So let's talk about Google Summer of Code, which we do call GSoC. And yes, we do use a lowercase o most of the time, or at least I always do, but not everybody else does. But yes, it is, in theory, it is GSoC with the O as a lowercase. But this is the 20th year of Google Summer of Code. So we're really excited. It's really special to be able to meet this milestone. As far as I'm aware, there are no other programs that have been, especially not open source programs, that have been around for developers for 20 years, like Google Summer of Code has. So it's really special. This is a super huge milestone for us. And I'm really excited that I get to be here and be part of it. I have been part of this team for over 13 years, and I've been leading Summer of Code. I've been helping with it that entire time, but then leading it for 8+ years now. And I also used to lead the Google Code-In contest for 7 or 8 years as well, which was our contest for high school students. So I'm not sure if some of you might have been involved in that. We wrapped that up back in 2019 was the last year that we ran that program. But let's talk about Summer of Code. So I'm going to call it GSoC for most of the day today, just because it's quicker. So GSoC is an online international program. It's really designed to encourage new contributors to participate in open source software development while being guided by mentors from these open source communities. So it's always been an online program. That's not just something that happened because of the pandemic. It's always been online. It's always been international. And the key is it's a mentorship program. It's a way for new people to get introduced into open source software development in kind of a nice, easy way, right? Because anytime you can go to an open source project and start contributing, but GSoC helps you make that a little bit easier, especially when you're a student. You may not feel as comfortable with your skills yet, and you kind of think, well, should I ask questions? Is it weird? Do they want me? Because I new, I don't know that much yet. Google Summer of Code really is a way to get past all those barriers and to understand that the organizations that participate want you in their communities. They're there to help basically train you, right? They want you to learn the ins and outs of successful open source software development. So these are some quick stats. We've had over 20,000 GSoC contributors from 116 countries in the previous 19 years, over 19,000 mentors from 133 countries, and we've had over 850 open source mentoring organizations. And at least 42 million lines of code have been produced through Google Summer of Code. So I'll briefly go over kind of the goals of the program so you kind of understand, well, why is Google doing this? Number one, we want to bring new contributors into open source software development. It really is important to keep bringing new people into open source because, people retire, people go on to other things. You need to always have new people coming to any community, right? To keep it fresh and to keep the new ideas there. So it really is important to have these new developers constantly coming in. Second, it's really about helping these communities stay healthy, because by having these new people coming in, they, again, get new ideas. They also have people become mentors. People who were their GSoC contributors often become mentors. And then they keep building, they become committers in these communities. They sometimes go on to become leaders in various forms, depending on the different organizations and their, kind of hierarchy or whatever. So some of them go on to become presidents or president of the open source community or, various leaders. And one of the cool things here is it really is giving the contributors exposure to real world software development scenarios. So often when you are in a university program or in a boot camp or any kind of academic program, or even if you're self-taught, you're working on things that are theoretical. You're not actually working on code that's going to be used by thousands, tens of thousands, and often even millions of people at some point. So with GSoC, you have that unique opportunity to work on a large code base that's being used by people today. It's actively being used. And you're going to learn testing because that's often something that's not taught or not taught extensively in academic programs. So you're going to learn about testing. You're definitely going to learn about version control. You're going to learn a bit about software licensing because, of course, each open source project will have a certain license that they use, and they have a reason why they chose that particular license. So they'll briefly go over that with you. And then it really, of course, is about distributed development. Obviously, over the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of people have gotten used to doing distributed development because you really are working with people from all around the world. Your mentor might be in Mexico or in Iceland, and you're in Nigeria or Congo or wherever, right? So it really is about where, just it's about working with people from all these different communities and backgrounds and learning from them because everyone brings something different to the table. So just think about that. And, I know people get nervous and like, well, am I good enough? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it really is about they expect you to be able to learn and want to learn. So if you have an attitude where you are excited to learn more, then you're a great fit for GSoC. We'll go into exact requirements here in just a second. One of the other things that, of course, is a goal of the program is to have more open source code available for everybody, right? The more code that's available for everybody, the faster things can get done. So whether that's talking about security issues or even AI, whatever, the more people and more hands that you have on it, the faster things can happen. And of course, this is really going to help build your professional skills. So when you go out and to get a, I say a real job, but to get a full-time job, you will have so many valuable skills that you didn't have before this program. You're also going to have more connections, and you're just going to have that experience and really that confidence. I think that's one of the things that often I hear the most in feedback from our GSoC contributors at the end of the program is that it really helped them work with a large code base and realize that they can do this, because a lot of people most people, I would say, probably going into the program are kind of going, okay, I can do this, but I'm a little nervous. And they realize that the mentors are there to help them. They want you to succeed. They want you to be part of their community and really to hopefully stay involved in their community even after GSoC ends. So specifically about GSoC, it's open for students and for beginners in open source software development that are 18 years or older. So if you're a student and over 18 and not in an embargoed country with the US, then you're good to go. If you're not a student, but you are a beginner to open source software development, which if you kind of have a question as to am I a beginner, you can go to our FAQ on our site, and there's a question that gives you about 6 or 7 different scenarios to help you kind of determine if you're a beginner. And it's things like, if you've done a few pull requests for an open source project in school, you're definitely still a beginner. If you've been contributing, maybe fixing a few bugs here and there, then likely you're probably still a beginner, right? But if you've been contributing to an open source project for 3 years pretty regularly, you may not be a beginner. So just kind of read through that FAQ, and it probably will answer your question for your particular scenario. Now, let's kind of get into the nitty-gritty here. So some of the specifics with GSoC, this year we actually have 3 different size projects that you can choose from. We have the newest, which is a 90-hour project. And I will say that I've been reviewing all of the org ideas lists of the 195 orgs that we accepted this year. And I'd say probably 20% or so have some 90-hour projects. Some have a lot. Some have a few. So if you're looking for a 90-hour, you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper because we didn't make that a requirement. We didn't make the organizations have 90 hours. This is kind of something we're trying out this year. So we wanted to see some orgs it's going to work great and they can have projects that they can make 90 hours. Other orgs, their projects or their code bases are so complicated, it doesn't make sense for them to have a 90-hour project. So you will definitely see the majority of the projects will be what we call medium or large projects. Medium projects are about 175 hours. Large projects are about 350 hours. So keep that in mind. I'll show you an example of what it will look like on the organization's ideas page here in a second, so you can see, but it's very clearly marked what size project that they want you to do. And a few times, in some instances, organizations can have certain projects that can be, maybe a medium or a large, depending on how you scope it. So if you scope it smaller, then it's going to be the medium. If you kind of expand the scope, then it could be a large project. So, think about what your time commitment is, how much time do you have available this summer? And think about the fact that the standard coding period is 12 weeks. Now, we also have something that we started a couple of years ago where you can extend your project length by 2-week intervals. So basically 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, or 22 weeks, with 22 weeks being the maximum. And this is really to help you if, say you are doing classes this summer, or maybe you're going to be getting married or whatever, or you're going to be moving or something, or going on a vacation, or going to a family reunion, and there's a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or so that you're going to be really busy. You can talk to your mentor about that now when you're applying and say, I know I'm not going to be available from July 1st to July 21st. And that's fine. When it's best to communicate that as early as you know. So if you know that, that's totally fine. And your mentor can say, well, do you think you can make it up in that full, over 9 weeks, or do you want to extend it? Because it's very easy for the mentors and org admins for GSoC to extend a project to say 14 or 16, 18 weeks, etc. But it really is mostly about kind of how much time your mentor also has available, because mentors are volunteers. 98% of them are volunteers. So they may have a hard, cutoff date that, okay, the 14 weeks is the longest that they can do for a project. So that's why it's really important to talk to them early, as soon as you know what your situation might be. And then on the other hand, we also have people who they're going through their project and it's going really well, and it just becomes clear to them and to their mentor that they're just not going to quite be able to complete it in 12 weeks. So the mentor will say, let's extend it to 14 weeks or 16 weeks, just so that, the final bits can get done by the GSoC contributor and they're not rushed. So that's also a common occurrence. So some of these things you won't know until later, and that's fine. But if you do know for sure, talk about that now and just set the expectations. One of maybe the most important thing about GSoC is communication. We say it a lot. We say it in every email that we send out to GSoC contributors: communicate, communicate, communicate. If you're having issues, communicate. If you're confused about something, communicate. If you need to be gone for a few days, communicate, right? And the same goes with your mentors. They need to be communicating effectively with you as well. So the program really relies on people communicating. Now, of course, we mentioned that you will have mentors there to guide you. Oftentimes you have multiple mentors, because either as a backup or because parts of the project one person knows more about, and then another part somebody else is more familiar with. So you might have multiple mentors who kind of trade in, trade out. Others, they just have they just want to give you a community, and so they give you 2 or 3 mentors that are just always there to help you. So either way is totally fine, but do keep in mind that you will have very possibly multiple mentors. And of course, you're going to earn a stipend. You've probably heard about that. The stipend is not a fortune, but it will give you, it will make it easier for you to be able to take part in GSoC, build your skills, build your community, and then also earn some money along the way. So the idea is that you can do GSoC and not have to get another job or something else, right? So you can focus on the program. Now, if you're doing the 175-hour or 90-hour, then you may, maybe you already have a part-time job or something else that you're doing. So again, your time commitment is going to need to be a lower amount for GSoC, and that's totally fine. It's one of the reasons that we brought in this idea of multiple size projects. And finally, a great thing about GSoC is that you get to choose which project you work on. You don't have somebody sitting there saying, oh, you've got to work on this project, and it's something that you don't care about, right? So you get to have that power to decide what is interesting to you, and then you ask the organizations about it, and you write a proposal on it. So you find what interests you. If you're interested in security, look for the projects related to security. If you're interested in AI or in science, look for the projects related to those. So it really is about figuring out, what do you care about? Because you're going to be spending 3+ months writing code on this project. So you want it to be something that's interesting to you. Nothing worse than having a summer filled with working on a boring project, right? So don't do that. Find something that intrigues you and that challenges you and that really interests you. And then sometimes maybe it's something you thought you were interested in security, and then you start working on GSoC and you're like, okay, that's fine, but that's not really what I want to continue doing. So then that's also good too, because then you learn, all right, that's not something I want to keep doing for the rest of my life. Let's switch to a different kind of area of expertise. So we've announced all of the organizations, again, 195 of them, that will be part of Google Summer Code this year. Right now, which is why I was really wanted to be able to talk to you all this week, right now is the perfect time to do your research, figure out which organizations interest you, look at their project ideas, and start reaching out to them now. The earlier you reach out, the more likely you are to be selected into the program. Again, the earlier you reach out, the more likely you will be accepted into the program. You've significantly raised your chances if you start reaching out to the organizations over the next week or two. The reason behind this is if you wait until March 18th, so from March 18th to April 2nd, that's the actual application period. So that's when you actually will go to the GSoC site. You'll create a username, you will answer a couple of questions, you'll agree to the program rules, and then you'll submit your project proposal through the GSoC site. But that's from March 18th to April 2nd. So many people will wait until that point to start reaching out to the organizations that the organizations will be overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to talk to as many people, and certainly not be as responsive as they can be over the next few weeks if you reach out to them. And so I mentioned communication is important. You must communicate with the organization that you're writing a project proposal to if you want to be selected in the program. So it's not about just writing a great project proposal. Anybody can write a great project proposal, especially people using Chat GPT or whatever, right? Any kind of AI, you can write a great proposal. So that's why it's even more important this year for organizations. They're making sure that they're having these conversations with the contributors that they accept. So you must reach out to them. And they make it very clear how they want people to reach out to their community. Usually that's through some kind of chat channel. Maybe it's a mailing list. You may even end up doing some sort of very short phone, when I say phone, or video interview might be strong, but something similar to that, right? It's not going to be an hour-long interview, but they just want to be able to get to know you and also see if you can do the things that you say you can do, right? Some other organizations are going to actually give you tests to do as well, very basic tests, but they just want to be sure that people can, do a pull request, things like that, or get the environment set up on your computer. So that's the kind of things that they're just wanting to be able to see that people can do. Because if people can't do that, then they certainly can't spend a summer coding for GSoC in their community. So again, the next week or two is really an ideal time to start reaching out to the organizations. I strongly, strongly encourage you to do that. I'll probably say this 5 times in the next half hour here. But then the organizations will review all the proposals they received. And then on May 1st, we'll announce all the accepted GSoC contributors for 2024. And then you'll have about 3.5 weeks where you will basically do what we call a community bonding period. And that's when you and your mentors will set your milestones. So like, okay, by end of week 2, you should have this done. By end of week 4, you should have this done. By the midterm, you should have this. By the final, you should have this. And you'll also get to know the community. They'll probably set up some sort of a call, so you'll get to know the community, hopefully get to know any other GSoC contributors that might be taking part in the program with that community this year. You'll read up on some documentation, get the environment set up on your computer, basically get you ready so that you can actually start coding on May 27th. So I mentioned earlier, you must be at least 18 years old, and that's you get to be 18 by the date that you register for the program. So if you are 17 today, but you turn 18 on, say, March 25th, then you have to wait until March 25th to apply, which is fine because that's during the March 18th to April 2nd, application period. But again, you cannot agree to the rules until you are 18. There are no exceptions to that. That's just a legal requirement. We will never accept anybody under 18 under any circumstances. So that is what it is. If you're not 18 yet, then hopefully you turn 18 next year and you can participate in the future. But you can keep doing things to prepare you for the program, which is great, but you do have to be 18 years or older. Again, you need to be either a student or a beginner to open source software development. You need to be eligible to work in the country in which you're going to reside during the coding period. So if you were in a country, say on a student visa, then you need to make sure you should reach out to your academic advisor now and make sure that your visa will allow you to participate in Google Summer of Code, because everyone's situation is different. So we can't help you with that. You've got to decide with your academic advisor if your visa situation will allow you to participate in the program. Many people can. Most of the ones that can are eligible to accept the stipend. But again, certain visas, for whatever reason, the way they're worded, you're not allowed to accept any kind of a stipend. Or sometimes it's something like you can only work 30 hours a week, which means that you would need to do probably one of the medium-sized projects or something like that. Or you do a large project that extend it over 14 to 16 weeks, things like that. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you have any question, reach out to your academic advisor now. You cannot be a resident of a U.S. embargoed country. And you can only be accepted into GSoC a total of 2 times. So if you've been accepted once before, that's okay. You can be accepted again. Now, if you've applied to GSoC before and haven't been accepted, that's okay. That doesn't count as one of your acceptances. It's only if you actually were accepted into the program as a GSoC contributor that will count as one of your 2 availabilities to be accepted into the program. Now, I mentioned before that choosing the project is really up to you. So you need to think about, what are your interests? Are you interested in data or operating systems, social, web, AI, security, developer tools? These are all things to think about. And that's going to make it easy because I'll show you here in a second how you can filter through those categories to help you narrow down the list of 195 organizations, because that's a lot. So you do need to figure out ways to filter down. One of the other ways to filter down is thinking about what technologies you're familiar with. So if you know C++ or Rust or Python or Django, then you can filter down by those technologies to help you see the organizations that use those particular technologies. Because you are going to be spending the entire summer coding in that language, so you need to be familiar with it. You don't need to be an expert. No one's expecting you to be an expert. But if you've only been coding in Python for 3 months, then this is probably it's almost certainly too early for you to start doing GSoC. Whereas if you've been coding in Python for a year or so, then you should be fine, right? So that's kind of one way to think about it. But if you've just started coding the last few months on whatever language, that's going to be really tough to try to spend 12 plus weeks coding in that language when you're still learning so much about it. So I would strongly encourage you to wait until next year if you've just started coding in a particular language. Now, some organizations are going to require, or certain projects within an organization will require maybe multiple, or at least some knowledge of multiple programming languages, but those are all marked very clearly on the project idea as well. And finally, back to figuring out what availability do you have. Is the 175-hour project a better fit for you than the 350-hour? Or is the 90 a better fit for you this year? That's something that you need to decide yourself. Last year, we just had the medium and large projects, and we had about, I think, 53%, I think, were large and 47% were the medium. So almost half, or, it was almost equally divided. So just think about what works for your situation. All right. Now, so this is what the GSoC site will look like. If you go to the GSoC site, then and click on the organization, the 2024 organizations, then you can see at the top here, we have all these different categories. So again, artificial intelligence, data, development tools, sorry, it's very tiny on my screen, end user applications, infrastructure and cloud, media, etc. Right? So you can click on one of those. If you click on one of the buttons, then it'll narrow down and give you just the little cards down below for the organizations that used that category as one of they can basically put themselves into up to two categories. So again, sometimes an organization can have, for example, AI projects, but it's not an AI organization per se. Like maybe they consider themselves media or something, or infrastructure and cloud, but they can still have projects that are AI related. So by clicking this little button, that'll help you narrow it down. And then also you see the little search field about halfway down where you can enter, again, you can enter cloud or AI or web, or you can enter Python, C++, Rust, Go, Android. So you can sort by language, or if there's a particular organization that you're interested in, say you're looking for the Eclipse Foundation, you can type in Eclipse Foundation. So this will just help you filter it down from that 195 organizations. And then when you click on one of those cards, this is what will show up. This one we clicked on MetaBrains. So they've got the title, a very short description of what the organization does. Then they list the technologies. And again, these technologies, they're not saying you need to know all of these technologies. These are just the technologies used by the organization. So when you look at their ideas list, it's going to have, one idea might be using Python, another one might be using React. So again, don't think, I have to know all five of these programming languages. That's definitely not the case. And then we give them kind of free reign to type in the topics. So the topics can be they're very broad because it's whatever the organization chooses to type in there. But for example, music recommendation, music social network, open data. So that's what they've typed here. They've got a link to their org, a longer description, and then they have their ideas lists. Sorry, this picture is actually from the archive. So the left part, the little button that says 2023 projects, that wouldn't be there, but it would show a button that would say view 2024 ideas list, or actually it just says 2024 ideas list. So you'd click on that, and then they'd have all their ideas. So for example, here's the first one. They've actually listed the mentors that they plan on having available for this project idea. They have the languages required, so JavaScript, React, data visualization. They actually even have a forum for discussion on this specific idea, which is cool. Not all organizations are that specific. Then they have the project link, so 350 hours. A lot of times it'll say large. So large is the same as 350 hours, or medium is 175, small 90. And then they have a difficulty level. The difficulty is not required, but we encourage the organizations to put this. Most of them did this year when I was reviewing all the ideas lists. And this is really to help you understand, is this an easy project? Is it more of an intermediate or kind of medium level project? Or is it hard/difficult? And what you want to think about is it's not necessarily going to be that a small project is easy. Not necessarily. You can have a small project that's hard. The small is more about the scope of the project. So you could also have a large project that would be considered easy, right? Which is what they did here. Or a medium project that could be considered hard. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if you have been only coding for maybe a year or so, you're going to want to focus on those easy projects. So if you go to an organization and you're reading through their ideas lists and you're sitting there going, whoa, I don't even understand what this idea is, that's okay. Just go and look and find another organization, because I did the same thing. Trust me, I've read through all these organization ideas. Some of them were way over my head. I didn't even know what they were saying. So that's okay. So some of the organizations, I would say they're just not great at describing their projects, or the mentor that wrote that particular project idea didn't didn't do a great job of keeping in mind that a newcomer to the organization may not quite understand what they're trying to say. So don't get frustrated. Just go and keep looking for another organization, because other organizations like MetaBrains here, they've been a part of GSoC, I think this might be their 19th year. I'm not sure they were there the very first year, but they've been doing this a very long time. So they know how to write these ideas and make it understandable for folks. But again, we have I think we have 30 new organizations this year. So, and even some organizations been around for a few years, they still, can have a mentor or two that just don't make it as specific as it probably should be. So don't get frustrated, just keep looking. And maybe you go through 3 or 4 before you find one that you're like, okay, this looks cool, I get it. So just don't get frustrated is kind of the key there. One other thing I want to point out is from this ideas list, you'll see over on the right side, they'll have like chat, email, Twitter. Actually, that's now been changed to show X, but you can click on that, and then that will take you to the communication methods that they're using and how they want you to communicate with them. And on this next slide, it didn't end up on here. Okay. So at the very bottom underneath where it says ideas list, often the organizations have something called contributor guidance. So if you see that link, it may not be there. If it's not there, that's okay. The organization didn't put anything in there. But I know MetaBrains actually does. So their 2024 page actually would have this. But it says contributor guidance, and it's a link. And so you would click on that, and then they would have very specific instructions of how they want you to reach out to them. For example, machine learning for science. I know when you click on theirs, they go through like, this is how you can reach out to us, whether it's through Slack or whatever, but reach out to us here. And then they also have various tests that they want people to do. Sometimes it's a pull request or whatever that organization's requiring, but they have very specific things that they want you to do before reaching out, or like reach out and then do these next steps, right? So just be sure to read, if there's a contributor guidance there, be sure to read that, because that's going to be very specific about what they want. And often they'll actually even have a template as to how they want you to write the proposal. Like they'll have specific questions, or even just, again, the template. So that's going to make it even easier for you to just start writing your proposal, because you'll follow that template. So I know this was a question that was on the queue. How do I choose an organization? So this is one we're going to spend some time on. As I mentioned, you need to narrow it down from this year we have 195 organizations. So narrow it down. Then also read kind of about what the organization does by clicking on their URL, just so you kind of understand more about it. Because maybe you're like, oh, this sounds really cool. And then you read about it, you're like, maybe not. Or maybe their little one-line description was like, that doesn't sound that interesting, but let me click and learn more. And then you go, oh yeah, this is really cool. So just, click in a little bit further to understand more about the organization. Then the main thing is reading through their project ideas list and try to find a couple that look interesting to you. Because you can read through an ideas list and go, okay. And then move on to the next organization if nothing is standing out to you. Because again, you're going to spend 12 plus weeks coding on this project. You want it to be something that interests you, because there's tons of ideas out there. So if you're not finding it with the first couple of organizations, keep looking, which is again why I'm saying do this now while you have some time. And then once you found a couple of project ideas, then reach out to the organizations via the communications channels, which again, they have on the right side, or if they have a contributor guidance, that's kind of that overrides everything. Click on that first and use that, whatever their instructions are. And then when you're talking to the community, determine if you really kind of like that vibe, right? Maybe you're talking to the organization, you're like, oh, this sounds like a cool project. And then, the way they're communicating is, I don't know whether annoying is the right word, but you're just like, this is not really my thing. And that's okay, right? You get to choose. So go find another organization that you're like, oh yeah, this is really cool. Like these people are cool. This, this fits my personality. Great. You get to choose. So you've now narrowed it down to 1 to 3 organizations. Reach out to them, and then you start writing your proposal. So people often ask, what's going to be in a proposal? Well, actually, first of all, you can submit up to 3 proposals. Like this was also a question on the queue I saw. So you can submit a maximum of 3 project proposals. So you can submit one to 3 different organizations to get to your 3, or you can submit 2 different project proposals to the same organization and then 1 more to another organization. But do keep in mind that, for example, I looked last year, of the people that got accepted in the program, 95% submitted only 1 or 2 project proposals. So it really is about quality over quantity here. So be sure to spend your time writing, a good project proposal. Now, the project proposal isn't that, you need to do it and you need to do it well, but it's not something that's going to be super, long. So it's not going to be a thesis. It's not going to be 50 pages or anything like that. It's often only 3 to 8 pages. And so for the organizations that actually have the contributor guidance and have a template, they have very specific things they're asking for, right? Because they want to be able to gauge everybody's skills together, right? They want to make sure, because, again, somebody writing a nice formatted proposal, that kind of grabs your attention more than somebody, it's like, oh, that's a mess. That doesn't mean that the nice, pretty proposal is better, or that the person who wrote it is going to be a better contributor for their community. So this is where you want to make sure that you answer their questions, which could be things like what experience you have or why you're interested in the project. They may ask a few questions that you would have on your CV or resume. But think about, if you're talking to the organizations now, you're talking about the ideas, you can ask them questions. So by you asking questions, that's going to help you write your proposal, right? Because you're asking the question. Essentially, you're kind of asking what they want in the proposal without coming out and saying, what do you want in the proposal? But by them answering your questions, that's going to help you craft your proposal. So this only helps benefit you. Now, also, the earlier you write the proposal, the better, because if you write it over the next week or 2, maybe even 3 weeks, they might have time to give you some actual live feedback and some real-time feedback and say, okay, this looks good, but you might want to change, some of these other things or focus on this some more, or you didn't address this one thing that we're really interested in. So again, communicate. If you're reaching out to them, that's only going to help you make a better proposal. And also having those conversations, they're going to remember you, right? And so that's what you want. You want them to remember you, because when they have a list of 20 people, some orgs might have 20, some might have 2 or 3 that are interested in one particular project idea. You want them to remember you and go, oh, that person was really interested in this project. We had a great conversation. So you want them to remember you. I mentioned before, 98% of mentors are volunteers. So if you reach out to them, they don't get right back to you, be patient, especially if the closer you get to that March 18th and April 2nd timeframe, because again, at that point, they're just gonna be overwhelmed. So reach out now and you're much likely to get a faster response. And again, not everybody's gonna be on your time zone. So you might send a message via their Slack channel or whatever, and most of their team might be in Europe, or they might be in Singapore or in Canada. So it can be, it can be off from the time that you are trying to communicate, and that's okay, but just keep that in mind as well. All right. So I mentioned they're going to be things like kind of your background skills, maybe a short biography about yourself, related work that you've done to how, this project. So if you're working on something that's security related, if you've done any kind of other security work, or maybe a class you've taken or whatever, or if you've done some sort of certification, that's even extra bonus, but things like that. They're also going to want you to think about the deliverables. So they're going to want you to think about how you would tackle that problem and how you would break it down. So things like what would you do the first couple of weeks? And then week 3 to 4, you would try to do this next thing. Because that shows that you've kind of thought through the project. Now, again, it can totally change. Like if you get accepted into the program, it might change significantly, the structure. You thought you could do these 6 things in the first 6 weeks, and you and your mentor are like, well, no, reality is you could probably only do 4. Or maybe you can actually do 8, but those things will adjust. But they really just in the proposal want to see that you can kind of think through the problem and how you would break it apart. And also have a clear title. One of the worst things is having something that just says Jane's idea to organization A, or to whatever organization, because again, they're trying to sort all the people that are interested in a particular project idea. So if they can't even figure out what idea you're interested in by the title, that just makes it harder for them to kind of sort through them. So again, just make it very easy. And as I mentioned, generally most proposals are 3 to 8 pages. So they're not super long. So don't stress out about that. Here's the timeline, also available on our site. I want to get to some Q&A, so I'm going to skip through this pretty quick. One final thing, we do have 2 evaluations. We have one at the midpoint, which we call a midterm, and one at the very end, so the final. Now, people get stressed out about this. This is not like taking a midterm exam. There's nothing like that. For you, the midterm is just answering a few questions, and the final is answering a few questions. There are questions like, essentially how, was your mentor responsive? What was your favorite part of GSoC? What was most difficult? Things like that. Would you recommend your mentor to others? And these are things so that Google can see, is an organization doing right by their GSoC contributors, or is there seeming to be a problem? But also it helps us understand how we can make changes to the program and make things better for everybody. So the mentors are also doing kind of similar questions. The difference is also the mentors have a question on there, should this person pass the midterm or, and then the final evaluation. And the only reasons, there are probably about 3, that they would decide not to pass a GSoC contributor are the contributor has basically gone missing, right? You're not communicating, you've just disappeared, they haven't heard from you in a few weeks, they don't know what's going on, which is why I say communication is key. If you just disappear, then they have to fail you, right? That's really no choice. Now, if you have something going on in your life, send us a very simple text or a ping or an email and just say that there's a health scare in my family or whatever it is, right? You don't have to go into super detail, but just say, I'm going to have to be offline for the next couple of weeks. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you when I can. But don't just disappear. Just give them a very brief 1 sentence, I'm going to have to be gone for a while. I can't talk about it, whatever, right? So just keep that in mind. The other reason is you really oversold your skills. So maybe you told them you could do X, Y, and Z, and it's clear you can only do X. So don't oversell your skills. They expect you to be learning and wanting to learn more, and that's okay. They know you're beginners and often students, so that's fine. But don't try to oversell your skills. And then the third, so those are the main 2 reasons, right, that people fail the program. The other is basically the person is just ignoring the mentors and their feedback and just doing what they want to do and just I know the best way to do this. Yeah, that's not great. So don't do that, right? Listen to your mentors. If for some reason, this is very rare, if for some reason you and your mentor just aren't clicking, talk to the org admin, because there's often another mentor that can fill in to help. Because sometimes it just is 2 personalities just aren't working for whatever reason. And that's, that does happen on very rare occasions, but just talk to the org admin about it. All right. So next steps for you. If you haven't already, read the program rules, FAQs, watch a couple of our videos, read the contributor guide. So much great information. There's including a section on how to write a great project proposal. So at least read that. And each section is often 1 page. So this isn't a massive amount of information to read. You can probably read the entire guide in hour and a half, probably, if you read from beginning to end. And then we've announced all the organizations. So now is the time to reach out to them and just think about how much time you have to commit to the project. Now, we're going to be putting a copy of these slides. They're going to share these with you, so it's available. It's a not quite as pretty version because this is a proprietary version that we have here. So the slides that you'll get aren't quite as pretty, but it has all of the same information on there. And so, there we go. Perfect. Thanks, Balaji. And so there's the link there that you can use to get a copy to these slides. And then now we're ready to get into some Q&A real quick. All right. I think you're muted, Balaji. Or sorry, at least for me, you are.
Yes, I was. Sorry. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was quite an insightful session, and we hope you all viewers found it helpful. Please keep your questions coming in. We try to prioritize those who sent the questions beforehand. So let's get right into that. So I think a couple of the questions are pretty much already answered. the first one around how to participate in GSoC. I think the entire session already covered that. If you joined late, like we mentioned in the chat, you can rewatch the entire stream so you can catch up with all the information or check out the slides. How do I prepare a proposal? I think that was also covered. This came up a lot of times. Can I submit more than 3 proposals if I wish to?
Nope. 3 is the
Okay.
max.
Okay. So
yeah, sorry.
okay, 3 is the max. What are the key areas to concentrate on for you to be selected?
And this goes back to what I talked about, communication, right? Reach out to the organizations now. That's the other part. Reach out to them now. And that's going to up your chances significantly, which is why we really want to make sure we were able to get the session in for y'all this week so that you can reach out to them this week or early next week and really significantly increase your chances of being accepted this year.
All right. Thank you very much. How are our work hours tracked?
They're not really tracked, so it's not like, you're clocking in 9 to 5. Again, you're remote, so a lot of it is on you just to make sure you're doing the work that you need to be doing. And when we're giving a time, it's an estimate. So when we're saying a large project's 350 hours, some people might do it in 300, some might take 500, right? It just depends on partly what your skills are, and just kind of how fast you can learn and catch on, and how much you're kind of pushing yourself as well. So again, it can vary greatly. So generally, there's no one really tracking because it's not a job. So no one's really tracking. There's making sure you're getting through your certain tasks. Some organizations do require you to meet or to send them some sort of report, whether that's once a week or even every day, kind of show that you've done something. So each organization is different on that front.
All right. Thank you. What's the best way to approach projects?
Reach out. If they do have that contributor guidance link on their GSoC page, be sure to read that. And that will be very specific on how they want you to reach out to them. If they don't have that, then over on the right side of that page where it had, chat or mailing list or X, that is exactly how they want you to reach out to them. So click on that and then reach out to them via those channels.
All right, thank you. I think the next one is pretty much answered already. So this one says, how can contributors who apply guarantee they will be chosen?
You can't. It's as simple as that. So do all the things I told you today, and you're definitely increasing your chances significantly. So.
All right. So we got quite a number of these. Are technical writers or data analysts welcome to GSoC, or only those who write software code?
GSoC is about coding, so it's not a documentation project. If you want to look at documentation, look at Season of Docs. That is actually open, I think just opened or it's about to open. So I would look into that. I think I saw Erin posted she leads the program. She's on my team as well at Google, and she's great. But yeah, just reach out and look into that. So Season of Docs is where technical writers should go.
Yeah. How about data analysts?
That I don't know. I don't know a program that focuses on just data. I know people who do data that are also engineers, software engineers. So yeah, if you can code as well, then yeah. But if you don't code at all and you're a data analyst, that I can't help you with. Sorry, I don't know.
All right. Okay. So we got quite a number of these. Can employed developers be a part of GSoC? Could you have a full-time job and still do this?
It depends. It depends on a couple things. One, you still must be a beginner in open source development. So a lot of people who have been coding for a while or employed developers would not be considered beginners. So keep that in mind. The other thing is also find out if your organization or the company that you're working for is going to allow it. Some organizations, you've signed various whatever documents that they have you sign when you join their company won't allow you to do any other paid job, right? So that's actually something particular you need to look into as well, which again, I can't help you answer that question. That's something that's specific to your situation. So just check into it, and it might be fine, but just you don't want to find out later that it's not, and then you lose your job. So don't do that. So just make sure you do your research ahead of time.
All right, cool. So does the GSoC program begin at the learning process from the basics and it gradually increases?
Yeah, I mean, you need to know the basics because again, you need to be able to be comfortable coding for 12 weeks in a particular programming language, right? So if you know Python, then you need to be comfortable be able to code for 12 weeks. Again, they're not going to expect you to be experts, but again, you can't if you just started learning 3 months ago, it's too early. Wait until next year, right? Keep learning and then wait until next year.
All right. I think the next question is quite similar to this. What level? So, next question: what are the resources one can use to learn and equip themselves for the upcoming application for the GSoC? I think that was shared in the last page of your slides, so you could check out the slides, which we would put up also at the end. The next question: how can GSoC help one become a better contributor and developer?
You're learning all the skills, and you're also remember you're learning from your mentor. So they've done this for a while. Some of them have done it for decades, right? And so you're going to learn kind of their tips and tricks. You're going to learn the resources that they use to help find answers to questions, or also reasons why they don't do something, right? Because you're like, oh well, we learned to do this way in school, and they're like, well, maybe you don't want to do that way because of this, right? So you're going to learn that real life actual coding. Again, doing it in school is great, but real life can be different, right? So it's going to really help prepare you for when you go out and get a full-time development job.
All right, thank you very much. The next question is, can I use a past project to get a leverage in my application, I presume?
Oh, do you mean like a past project that you've done? I think
Yes.
that's what they're asking. Okay. So yeah, no, that's something, if there's something that you've done before and you can definitely reference it, that's great. Because then they can see, oh, okay, this person does know how to do these things. So I mentioned there were various tests that some of the organizations require. So being able to point to a project that you've done, that's another great thing. Then they can go and look at your code and go, oh yeah, this person definitely knows what they're doing. Great. Okay. Because part of it is they've got to essentially weed out people who want to take part but really don't have the skills, right? Versus the ones who are excited and do have the skills, or have the skills and then can be taught the additional skills, right? So that's kind of again why you have to communicate, because they've got to talk to you to be able to figure that out, because they can't figure that out just by someone writing a nice CV, because again, anybody can write a nice CV. That doesn't mean a whole lot. It's communications that's the most important here. So again, communicate.
Yes, it reminds me of developers. Okay, cool. So next question is, how can I get into GSoC as a student in my penultimate year? I presume that's like last year or second to the last year.
I mean, it's same thing as all the rest, it's just apply, right? I mean, everything we talked about today still applies, whether or not, you're about to graduate, or even if you just graduated, you're not a student, but you're often still probably a beginner in open source. So you'd be eligible.
Yeah. So I'll leave the last two questions since those are a little out of scope, and then we'll go through the questions from the comments, those that we haven't answered yet. So I'll just pick a couple of them. Let's see. So first one is, are there open science projects specifically in bioinformatics?
Yes. We actually have a couple that are very specifically bioinformatics. So yes, definitely.
All right. So you're a lucky person. Feel free to check out the projects list and the list of organizations to find those. I think we've answered these already. More than one proposal is not allowed. The max is 3.
Right.
So that's that. Let's see. When do we start to submit proposals?
Officially on the site, March 18th. But I would suggest starting to write that proposal over the next couple of weeks, because again, you can send that to the organization directly and they can look at it. And then some organizations will give you very extensive feedback, and that's going to be great because then you can tweak it. And then it's really perfect by the time you submit it March 18th or between March 18th and April 2nd. Otherwise, but yeah, I would just say start working on that now. But again, you need to have those conversations, because those conversations with the organization are going to help you craft that proposal.
All right, cool. So if I send proposals for multiple projects and all of them accept the proposals, do I get to choose which of them I want to go with?
I always laugh at this question because everybody asks it every year. It only affects 10 people a year, so it's not a big deal. Technically, no. Technically, the organization that ranks you highest gets you. The only way that you can kind of plead your case is if you've already written in the one that's really your favorite, somewhere either the beginning, probably the first page or last page of the proposal, write on there, this is my number one, choice for proposals. I've submitted another one, but you're my number one choice. So then that organization, if they're not the one that ranked you as high, but they really want you, they can say, hey, look, this is what the person wanted. And 95% of the time, the other org will like, okay, this is what the person wanted. Well, we'll give you this GSoC contributor and we'll take somebody else. So, and again, they know that people are submitting multiple proposals. So that's not going to be like, oh, well, they submitted to another org, forget them. That's not what they're
Yeah.
They understand. They know you're trying to hedge your bets, right? So it's fine.
All right, that's cool. So next question, do we send the proposal to the organization's contact?
So ultimately, you need to make sure that you submit it between March 18th and April 2nd on the GSoC site. But if you have it ready before that, then yes, you can send it to the organization. And again, talk to the organization. They may have very specific things like, okay, if you want to send us a draft your proposal, send it to this email address or share it with us here. I know one of the organizations we were talking to the other day, they actually have people share their proposals publicly. And so other people, so that everybody in their community can look at it. So it's also interesting because other contributors who are applying can see what other people are doing, which, I asked them, have you had a problem with cheating? And they said, no, because we all have had the conversation with that person. So we know that they're the first person that, wrote that, right? So there's not a issue because anybody else that been trying to write that, it's like, well, you obviously just copied off of that person. So you don't have to worry about that situation.
All right, thank you. So this one says, are there specific softwares needed to write the proposal? So I'm guessing it's how exactly do I write the proposal?
Yeah, I mean, again, some organizations will have a specific template. And so if they do, use that. If they have, I know, like I said machine learning for science just because I just chatted with them the other day. So I know for them, they have very specific tests that they have people go through and do. It's like 3-step process of you got to do this, this, and this before you even submit your proposal. And if you haven't done those 3 things, then your proposal is not even looked at, right? So some organizations are very specific about that. Most of them aren't quite that specific. They might just require you to do a pull request or something like that. But again, look at what each organization is different. They all have their different ways of figuring out how to help them narrow it down to a smaller, number of folks, because some of these organizations will get 150 applicants. Some will get 5. It just really varies.
All right. Thank you very much. This next question says, would we have access to the organization link? Yes, you would. We would also share the link to the slides at the end of this session. This one also has been answered. How many companies can I send? I don't think it has been answered. How many companies can I send proposals to?
I mean, it's the same as you can only send 3, a total of 3. So
okay,
3.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So next one, if a project is rejected, can I submit another one?
Nope. I mean, the proposals all happen, the proposal period is from that March 18th to April 2nd. And then when it closes on April 2nd, that's done. One thing also to keep in mind, please pay attention to the time zones. I know y'all are close. So we use UTC. And actually, if you log into our GSoC site, one of the questions it'll ask you is what your local time zone, because then it will help you always have that local time zone showing. But just be sure that you're paying attention to time zones, because a lot of people will go, oh, it's 1800 UTC. And they're like, oh, that's, for here, like, they're, oh, that's 6 p.m. in my local place. That's not for most people, right? So I know for y'all, you're only an hour off. So you're pretty close. But just don't wait until those close to those deadlines, because if you miss the deadline, it's too bad. Like, we don't do any extensions. We never extend a deadline. So I would say absolutely make sure you submit a proposal at least 3 days before. So March 31st or March 30th. And then you can always submit another one. So but at least you have a good proposal in there. Even if you go in and tweak it, at least and then resubmit, that's fine. But at least you've got something solid in there before the deadline, because your computer can die, electricity can go out, all kinds of things can happen, right? Or if you just get sick last minute, you're like, oh, great. There are no exceptions. So just don't wait until submit it 3 or 4 days ahead of time. So at least you have a solid, good thing in there. And then if you want to keep working on it and resubmit a new one, that's fine. But at least it's in there. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So the next one says, does the program increase our chances of getting good jobs amongst the organizations we are doing the open source projects with?
Sometimes it depends, because a lot of the organizations, some of the organizations have full-time jobs that they can, or have things where they can do like a contract, maybe a 6-month or 9-month contract with somebody after GSoC. Others don't have that additional money, so it depends, right? But a lot of the people you meet might be able to help you find a job in a different company, like because a lot of people aren't working on open source in their normal life, right? Like their normal life might be doing, maybe they were at, I don't know, Apple or wherever they're at, right? They're at some other company, but they do open source in their spare time because it's something they're passionate about in this particular project they really care about. So they can also help connect you to other, if they're really like, oh, you're a great, you're amazing, we want to help you find, a job. So you're building that network essentially.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The next question is this program for developers residing in Africa? What if you're an African in Canada?
That's fine. It's open for everybody, right? I mean, the one thing is, if you're African in Canada, I think that the situation is just, if you're a student or if you're there on a visa, you just need to make sure that your visa allows you to participate in GSoC. So that's something that you've got to figure out on your own. But if you're a Canadian citizen, you're born in Africa, but now you're a Canadian citizen or whatever, then you're totally fine. So it just depends on, again, visas are weird. So people just need to figure out their visa situation wherever they might be, because there's nothing worse. Like we had last year, we had 2 people who didn't look into it until halfway through the program and then realized, oh, they couldn't get paid. So, because some people, again, can do GSoC, but they just can't get paid. And some people continue to do it anyway because they realize the experience is super helpful for them. And that's fine. Like I think we had about 8 or 9 people last year who couldn't get paid because of their visa situation. But 2 of them didn't figure that out until after the midterm. They're like, well, I can't get any money because of this. I'm like, I can't help you with that, right? I mean, that's a visa situation. That's legal.
Yeah.
I have to do with that. So.
All right, cool. So while we keep going, you can look at the screen, you find the links. I did something funny here. I'm sure if you look at it very well, you would understand what that is. I know we're in February, but I wish we're still in December. But yeah, you can find links to GSoC, find links to OSCA's community. We'll talk more about that at the end. But yeah, the next question is the proposal like a cover letter?
No, I mean, it's a little more in depth than that, right? I mean, I think some of the content could be, because again, it's more about how you're going to tackle the problem, why you care about the problem, any background you have in that technology or, that type of thing. And then it's also, again, incorporating those conversations you've had with the organization to help you craft it. I mean, some of the organizations will have specific questions that they want you to answer in the proposal. Like I know a few of them, it's very specific. Everyone's proposal is going to look almost the same, except for, the answers to your questions. But like, because they want it to be like, okay, we're comparing apples to apples, right? Which makes sense. Like they were talking about this and we had a mentor discussion the other day. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, right? You don't want, because again, someone has a beautiful one. You're like, oh, it's so pretty. But you're like, but wait, I'm not judging on how pretty it is. I'm judging on the content. And so everybody has the same, template. Then you can judge it just on the content of what's in there. But again, the proposal is only a small part. I think people focus. I mean, yes, you need to write it. Definitely you have to do it. But that communication is what's going to get you into the program or not, right? So communicating with the organization. And then, yes, you definitely have to write the proposal, but the communication's, more important. You have to do both, but yeah, focus on that communicating. And again, the earlier you do it, the better.
All right. Thank you very much. Next question says, is there a limited number of selected contributors?
Yes. So we will see what that number is. The organizations will ask us, they'll request, this organization could, they had say 10 people that submitted great project proposals, particular, for their org. And, depending on it, like we have a set number, basically it's budget, right? So I have a certain number where I know how many people I can accept. And then I allocate those across the 195 different organizations. So yes, there's definitely a limited number. For example, last year we accepted, what was it, like 962, I think, which was a little lower. It's gonna be higher than that. We'll accept more than that this year. So there's some good news for you. We will accept more than we did last year. But I think it was over 50, was it like 5,400 people submitted at least one proposal. So it was less than 20%. So it's like 18%, I think, that got accepted. So that's still relatively high. But again, that's of people who actually submitted the proposal, because we have like 50,000 people that register, but then you go from 50,000 to like 5,800 who actually will submit, a full proposal. And, so So it
Yeah.
is
All
competitive,
right.
but it's also not, I mean, it's not as competitive as, for example, a Google internship or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Next question. In case my proposal is not accepted, can I volunteer with the organization?
Yes, and quite a few people do this. And in some cases, the organization might have a little extra money and they can either give you a little bit of a stipend on their own, or I know some orgs that actually what they'll do is they'll accept, say, 3 GSoC contributors because that's what they were given. But then they had 2 or 3 other people that were great. And they're like, we really wish we could have accepted them. But, because Google can only allocate a certain number, they didn't get what they wanted. They wanted 6, but they only got 3. So then they say, okay, these other 3 people, they offer them basically to go alongside. So technically they aren't GSoC contributors, but they're getting basically the same experience. So they're, being mentored, they're doing all these things. They're sometimes even meeting with the other GSoC contributors. And so it's basically the same experience. They're just not getting the stipend or technically be able to say GSoC contributor on their resume, but they get the experience and they'll still have that project to be able to reference and show people, here in GitHub, here's, the link to all the work I did. So they get all the perks minus they don't get the money and they don't get the title, if is the right word. But yeah, so that definitely does happen. That's happening more and more. I know quite a few orgs that have been doing that because they were like, we really think this person's great. We really want them part of our community. Because GSoC, open source, it really is about community and about people volunteering and contributing to the org. So ultimately what they want is for you to keep contributing after your GSoC summer ends, right? After your program ends in September, they're hoping that you stay involved in the community and maybe you become a mentor yourself. A lot of people that are mentors this year were former mentors themselves or former GSoC contributors themselves at some point.
All right. Thank you. Next question. This is probably answered during the talk session. How many months does the program last?
The standard coding period is 3 months. So of course, right now you'll be talking to people that you submit your application between March 18th and April 2nd. Then basically the month of April is the organization's deciding who they want to select. So you're not really doing anything related to GSoC at that point. May 1st, we had to say, hey, these are the accepted contributors for this year. And then you spend 3 weeks in that community bonding period, which is kind of a more casual, again, it's just getting to know the community, but you're still, spending time on that, right? But it's not, 20 or 30 hours a week. It's just kind of like getting ready to ramp you up. So then on May 27th, when the official coding begins, then you hit the ground running. Right. So officially coding 3 weeks, but I mean, your time commitment really is kind of over, like give or take over like 4 or 5 months, probably depending on, 4 months, I guess, because you basically the month of May, right, with community bonding and then the 3 months, so 4 months, plus what time you put in right now on your proposal.
All right. Thank you. Next question says, can English native speakers apply?
Yeah. No. So remember, I would say most mentors are not, most mentors are not native English speakers either, right? A lot of them, English is the second, maybe third, maybe fourth in some people's case language. But because we have a lot of folks from Europe, we have a lot of folks from India, from Asia, from Singapore. So, English, they understand that English is not the, native language for a lot of people. So it's okay. So a lot of people say, well, my English isn't very good. That's okay. Like they understand you're going to you may be using translation things. We have a lot of people from Spain. We have a lot of people from South America, right? That's totally fine. So you are going to need to be able to speak English, but again, you can use your translation tools or whatever. And in a few cases, if you happen to be, if you're French or you speak French, then you might, maybe your mentor might also speak French and you really luck out. But I wouldn't count on that. But it is possible, especially with, languages like French or Spanish. A lot of folks know those. Again, a lot of people in Europe know 4 or 5 languages. I don't know. I'm American, so of course I only know one because that's how we roll. But a lot of folks I know throughout the world really know multiple languages. Like obviously, a lot of people on this call know multiple languages, so y'all are doing much better than I am.
All right. Next question is by Samson. You could ignore it. Any more mentor summit?
Yes, there will be a mentor summit. I will be announcing the dates later in March, early April.
All right. Are all the projects that the organization submits selected? I'm not so sure.
Okay. No. Okay. I think I know what you're saying. So the organization may have, say, 10 project ideas listed. and that organization may actually only plan on accepting 5 projects. So no, right? They definitely will have more ideas, but part of it's also to see like what are the exciting ideas and what people talk about, because again, they're going to have a limited number of mentors available to mentor projects, and that's really usually their limitation, right? It's about if they only have 5 mentors, then they can only have 5 projects. If they had 10 mentors, they could have 10. So, and then some organizations want to have 2 people, so maybe they have 5 mentors, but they're only going to make sure they accept 3 projects. So yeah,
All
they
right,
definitely,
thank you.
it's another reason to communicate, right? Because if you're talking to them, you can also find out, and this is something I asked the other day because I was curious with how the mentors handle this. If some organizations may get 30 people applying to one project idea. So some of the organizations I thought did something really cool, which is they will put on the project idea popular. So it's very clear, you can apply to this, but a whole lot of people are applying to this. So maybe you want to look at something else, right? So keep that in mind. I thought that was I actually put that down as a note that I think other mentors, other orgs should do that, because I think that's a pretty cool way. Again, that makes it in your court. Like, it's competitive and that's up to you. But what in that case, some org people will then also submit another proposal to that same org. They really want to work with that org, but they'll submit it to a different project that didn't have as many people apply, right? So then their chances of being accepted are a whole lot higher. So kind of look at that too. And a lot of organizations will tell you, we're getting a lot of people with this particular project idea. Maybe you want to go look at something else, right? So they'll try to help you with that.
All right, thank you. So hang in there, people. We're almost at the end. We just have a couple of questions more to go through. Next question says, does Google hire GSoC students?
Flat out, no, but it definitely happens. A lot of people have gone on to become Googlers. I actually got an email last week from somebody thanking me. He was a student in 2013, and he's been a mentor and org admin for GSoC since. And then now he just started in the Zurich office back in January. So yeah, so it definitely does happen. It does not hurt to have that on your resume. It does not hurt to have Google Summer of Code on your resume, whether you're applying for Google or Microsoft or whatever company, a smaller company. It definitely is not going to hurt your situation, right? So yeah.
All right. Next question. How are the stipends paid to the organizations or mentees calculated? Does it depend on the size of each project or how many projects each organization submits?
Good question. So it depends definitely on the size of the project. So the stipend for a medium-sized project is half of the amount of the stipend for a large. The stipends are based on the country in which you're going to be residing during the coding period. So if you're residing in Egypt, then your stipend, you can go to our website and go to the FAQ. There's a section on there, a question about stipends, and there's a link, and you click on that link and it'll show you how much. You can look at by your country, and it'll show how much the stipend is for the 90-hour, the 175-hour, and the 350-hour project. So then you'll know what it is.
All right, thank you.
Represented here. I didn't look it all up, so you have to go check it out.
All right. Next question says, what visa types are needed to be paid?
I can't answer that for you, right? Everyone's visa situation, because I mean, even if you have the same visa as somebody else, there can be something tweaked in yours that again doesn't allow you. So yeah, that is a legal question. I am not a lawyer, so I can't answer that. And again, everyone's situation is different. So just be sure to go figure that out now, though. Make sure you talk to your, if it's a student visa, make sure you go talk to your advisor, I'd say this week, just because again, there's nothing worse than thinking you can participate and then finding out you can't, like, especially after you're doing all the work proposal, like that's really annoying. Right? So
yeah. All right. Next and last question on the comments. Do web developers have a chance to participate in GSoC?
Yeah, I mean, you're still writing code, right? So yeah, there are definitely some projects that are about fixing websites in a certain way or fixing parts. I noticed some of those for sure. So yeah, I mean, so using HTML or whatever, right? Like, but you need to be able to obviously develop, do web development. But yeah, I mean, it is just being comfortable coding in whatever programming language that might be that the organization uses or that you need for that specific project. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. So, for a couple of persons who were asking questions around how to get started with open source, if you're new to all of this, you can take a look at our awesome open source repository where we have a collection of all the resources you can find. Also, feel free to join our community. I'm sure many of you also asked, do we have like a community for those applying for stuff like this? At Open Source Community Africa, we exist for stuff like this. So you can join our community and feel free to ask more further questions and we would help you get started with that. And yes, the links to everything we've discussed, you can find them on the screen. We would also share a link to the slide that would also be up. It has been up multiple times. You can visit that link to find more information about everything. So we're going to take the last two questions, which were not so related. First one being, what would be your biggest advice for someone who is showing interest in open source and is seeking to get jobs through open source?
I mean, I think it really is about reaching out to a community, finding something that looks interesting to you. Because again, you can essentially join any kind of community outside of GSoC. GSoC is just kind of a method and a way to get more people involved, at one time. But organizations want new people coming in their communities all the time, right? So many already have documentation, like beginner documentation, which makes it super easy to where to get started, right? It's like, okay, if you're new to our community, go here. And some of these organizations participated in our Google Code-In program, which was for high school students. So they really had great specific, like MetaBrains, for example. They had really specific instructions because, if you're dealing with high school students, so it's people who were a lot younger and had even more questions, right, and less experience. So you want to find the organizations that have that kind of documentation. That's just going to make it a lot easier for you. And then just start talking to people. Again, open source people generally are really nice, and a lot of them are volunteers. They just want to welcome you into their community. So don't be, overwhelmed or scared about asking questions, because they want you to come in and, they want you to be part of their community.
All right, thank you. So before the last question, we'll take one or two more questions from the comments, and that would be it. This question says, are there rooms for product folks, those product managers and all that stuff?
Nope.
No. All right. No. Similar question also, can DevOps engineers contribute?
I mean, yeah, it is a coding program, right? So you have to be able to code. I mean, that's not to say that you have to be, because like we've had people that were music majors that took part in GSoC, but again, they knew how to code, right? They had some coding experience, right? So that is the key, right? You have to be able to code. Again, you're not going to expect to be an expert, but you do need to be able to code because it is a coding program. That's something we get asked. Like people ask, well, what about design projects? And it's like, for now, Google Summer Code is about coding, and of course, Season Docs is about documentation for the technical writers.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Last question from the comments. How can I volunteer for a community in case my project is not accepted?
Just talk to them, because especially hopefully you've already talked to them when you were doing your proposal, right? So they already know you. And again, a lot of them really want to be able to accept more people. Like sometimes it's a really hard decision to decide. They get it down to 3 or 4 people for this one project idea, and they're just, and they're having debates trying to figure out, well, who do we pick? And they would have loved to accept you. They just, can set more than one person for a particular project idea. So, you've already talked to them. So you've already gotten through that initial, okay, this is weird talking to somebody I don't know, you've already gotten through that part. And so just say, hey, I want to accept it, but I really think this project's cool. I'd like to keep contributing. And so they often have other ways, again, to help you contribute, even if it's just something smaller. Some of them will do, like I said before, where you almost run a similar GSoC program alongside, program like GSoC alongside their GSoC contributors. Others can be like, hey, well, we've got this one cool feature. You want to start working on this or working with me on this, or like, hey, why don't you start small with this over here? So just ask, right? Because that's part of the other thing. A lot of the people, they do get folks who aren't accepted into GSoC who then stay involved in their community because, they're doing cool stuff, right? And the people are like, oh, this is really fun. And I really like this community, and they want to be involved. So yeah, definitely not a problem. Definitely just keep communicating.
All right. Communicate. Thank you so much, Steph. The last question for today, which I think is one everyone wants to know. how did you get your role as a program manager at Google? And I think someone else also asked, and how has that been for the last couple of years?
So I got my role at Google. That's an interesting question. So I knew people. It's good to know people. But I started out as a contractor at Google in 2008, working on the Android Developer Challenge. So it was when we were releasing Android initially. And it was really cool because my background, interestingly enough, was working as a manager of antique shows in Texas before I moved to California. And so I did a lot of client management and working with the vendors and stuff. And so my friend was working at Google and said, hey, we need somebody on this team that can deal with all the judges and all the winners. So I basically dealt with all the judges. We had like 50 winners and finalists, and then I think 20 or 30 judges from around the world. So anyway, I just dealt with all of that, which was really fun and really cool. And I met people in my time there as a contractor. Like I met Chris DeBona because he was one of our judges. So I met him, and I met Kat Allman. And then a couple of years late, so my contract ran out. I went and did something else for a bit. I mean, boring. And then Kat reached out to me and said, hey, we have a role on our team. Would you be interested? And then I said yes. And so then I joined Kat and Chris with the Open Source Programs Office back in January 2011. And so I got to start working on Google Code-In and Google Summer of Code, like helping with those programs. And then I took over Code-In, I think within a year or so. And then I took over Summer of Code as well. So I was doing both back in 2015. Yeah, 2015. So it's been over 8 years now, 8.5, close to 8.5, I think. So yeah, so it's been fun. As far as the last couple of years have been interesting. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. It's been interesting. But I mean, it's been really cool that we've been able to keep doing the program, right? I mean, one of the things that was particularly kind of cool was when 2020 hit, we didn't have to change our program at all because our program has always been online because so many people were having to struggle, were having to scramble with all their programs. Programs were getting canceled left and right. All these people's internships, all these different things were changing. All we did is we extended, because it was happening in March, we extended the student application period an extra week because, things were going on in the world in March, obviously, of 2020. So we wanted to give people that opportunity to kind of get settled and get their application in. That was the only change we made. So that was kind of cool that we didn't have to change anything for the program, and it was already built. It was built to withstand a pandemic. Who knew? So that was pretty cool. And so it's been fun adding these new things like the project sizes, because up until 2021, all projects were essentially those large projects, which really was difficult for a lot of people who were, especially when you're doing classes in the summer, to try to do a large project and do your classes. Like people were just overwhelmed, right? And so once we were able to institute those medium-sized projects, that just made life a lot easier for people and opened it up to a lot more people who before were like, yeah, I just don't have the time to be able to do that. And then when we've added this concept of extending the project to maybe 14, 16, 18 weeks, that's also opened it up to even more people. And of course, now it's not just students. So we've made all these kind of subtle changes over the last 4 years in different ways that I think have really helped the program grow and really helped open it up to a whole bunch of other people, basically, beginners or folks in their, early in their software development career to be able to take part in GSoC, which is really cool. So done just because not everybody can be a student, or people just graduated, right? If you just graduated, I always had to say, nope, sorry. I'm like, that's really a bummer. You're like, you graduated 2 weeks ago, and you're like, well, okay. So now we don't have to say no, which is great.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you so much, Steph, for your time. We do appreciate you being here. And thank you, everyone, for joining in. As mentioned, you can find all the links on the screen, links to Stephanie's slide, links to GSoC, where you can find information on organizations, FAQs, the projects, how to apply, when to apply, and all of that information. Here is also the link to join the Discord server. If you're trying to, find more people to collaborate with, probably those you want to help you review your proposals, you can find people on the Discord server and then join that. If you're also new to open source generally, you're still trying to figure your steps, we have resources for everyone. So feel free to check all of that out, and we look forward to a successful GSoC and proposal for all of you. And yes, also feel free to join. We have OSCA chapters across different African countries. So if you find yourself somewhere close to that, you could also join that. Links are also on the screen. Feel free to explore all of that. And thank you so much. I think that'll be it, Steph. not sure if you have
Thank
any
you so much,
final words.
Kalaji. Thank you, everybody. And good luck. We hope to have a bunch of you involved in GSoC this year. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We would be ending shortly.